In the fall of 2011, the tranquility of a quiet suburban neighborhood in the United States was shattered by a chilling discovery. Dr. George Smith, a well-known 50-year-old physician, had been found dead in his own home, shot at close range. Dr. George Smith, born in 1960, was a 50-year-old, highly respected and successful doctor in his community by 2010. Known for his medical expertise and charismatic personality, he had a stellar reputation, and his clinic was one of the most sought after in town. His influence extended beyond the hospital walls, where he enjoyed a luxurious lifestyle thanks to his success. But beneath the perfect surface of his professional life, his personal life was falling apart. His relationship with his wife had grown cold and distant over the years. Their once strong bond had weakened due to the pressures of work and life, leaving Dr. Smith craving the excitement he felt he had lost. In this emotional void, temptation found its way in. Tina Carlin was a vibrant 28-year-old who felt trapped in her loveless marriage. Even though she was beautiful and charming, she often felt neglected and unappreciated by her husband. Tired of feeling this way, Tina decided it was time for a fresh start. She saw an advertisement for a receptionist job at Dr. George Smith's clinic and thought it might be just what she needed. Excited about the potential for a new beginning, she applied for the position. When Tina walked into the clinic for her interview on a chilly February morning, she was filled with a sense of hope. The clinic was bright and welcoming, buzzing with the sounds of patients and the faint smell of fresh flowers. As she waited in the reception area, her heart raced with anticipation. Then, Dr. George Smith entered the room. He was a charismatic, 50-year-old doctor whose presence lit up the space. With his confident smile and friendly demeanor, he instantly caught Tina's attention. During their interview, he made her feel at ease, and they had a pleasant conversation about the clinic and his passion for helping patients. Tina found herself captivated by his charm and warmth. After the interview, Dr. Smith offered Tina the job on the spot, and she couldn't believe her luck. Excited about starting this new chapter, she looked forward to working closely with him. As Tina settled into her role at the clinic, she and Dr. Smith began spending more time together. They shared laughs during breaks and exchanged meaningful glances that hinted at a growing connection. As Tina Carlin became more comfortable in her role at Dr. George Smith's clinic, the initial spark of attraction they had felt transformed into something far more intense. Their encounters, once marked by professional courtesy, were now laced with an undeniable chemistry that neither could ignore. It was a dangerous game, but both were drawn to it, each secretly thrilled by the rush of emotions that accompanied their growing bond. Initially, their flirtation was subtle, characterized by playful banter and lingering glances. Tina found herself looking forward to her shifts at the clinic, not just for the work, but for the moments she could steal with Dr. Smith. They began staying late after the last patient had left, discussing everything from trivial matters to their dreams and desires. Each conversation peeled back the layers of their lives, revealing vulnerabilities and hopes that they had kept hidden from others. Tina was captivated by Dr. Smith's wisdom and experience. He was a man who had seen the world, who knew how to navigate its complexities. In return, Dr. Smith found Tina's youthful exuberance refreshing. Her laughter filled the sterile clinic with warmth, making him feel alive in ways he hadn't in years. These late-night discussions often ended with a lingering touch or an accidental brush of hands, igniting a fire that both tried to resist but ultimately succumbed to. As the days turned into weeks, their interactions evolved into secret rendezvous. They would meet in the evenings at quaint cafes or hidden spots in the park, away from the prying eyes of the community. Each meeting felt like an exhilarating escape from reality, a world where they could be together without fear of judgment. During these clandestine encounters, they explored their attraction more openly, sharing stolen kisses and whispered confessions under the moonlight. Tina felt a rush of emotions she had never experienced before: excitement, passion, and a sense of being truly seen for the first time. In Dr. Smith, she believed she had found her true love, a man who understood her struggles and aspirations. The connection they shared felt deep and meaningful, transcending the physical attraction that had sparked their affair. She dreamed of a future with him, one filled with love, laughter, and the happiness that had eluded her for so long. However, as their affair intensified, so did the complications surrounding it. Dr. Smith began to distance himself from his wife, Eleanor, who had long felt the strain in their marriage. He found it easier to spend time with Tina than to confront the issues at home. As he became more emotionally invested in Tina, he struggled to maintain the facade of a perfect husband. Guilt began to gnaw at him, yet the thrill of being with Tina overshadowed his responsibilities. Meanwhile, Tina was caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She loved the excitement of their affair, but also grappled with the reality of Dr. Smith's marriage. The thrill of their secret life was intoxicating, but there were moments when insecurity crept in. Was she merely a distraction for him? Would he ever leave his wife? The more time they spent together, the more desperate she became for reassurance that their love was real. The affair, once a thrilling escape, now teetered on the edge of danger. They both knew that their secret could unravel at any moment, yet the risk only added to the allure. Late-night phone calls turned into heated exchanges, each yearning for the other while navigating the complexities of their lives. Tina often found herself daydreaming about a life with Dr. Smith, a life free from the constraints of her own unhappy marriage. As they continued their passionate affair, the boundaries between love and obsession began to blur. Dr. Smith felt alive again, invigorated by Tina's presence. Yet, the weight of his deception hung heavily on him, casting a shadow over their stolen moments. Meanwhile, Tina's heart was fully invested, believing in a future that might never come. As the weeks turned into months, Tina Carlin found herself increasingly intertwined in a world that revolved around Dr. George Smith. Their affair had transformed from a mere physical attraction into an emotional roller coaster, and with each passing day, Tina's dependence on him deepened. The thrill of sneaking around, the stolen moments, and whispered sweet nothings in the dimly lit corners of the clinic became the highlights of her life. Yet, as intoxicating as this affair was, it also came with an undercurrent of anxiety that Tina couldn't ignore. Tina began to envision a future with Dr. Smith. In her mind, she crafted an ideal life where they could be together openly, free from the shadows of secrecy that cloaked their relationship. She fantasized about a world where they would travel, share holidays, and perhaps even start a family. Each dream fueled her desire for a deeper connection, making her long for the day when Dr. Smith would choose her over his wife. However, beneath the surface of this romantic ideal, an unsettling reality simmered. Dr. Smith enjoyed the thrill of their relationship, the excitement of being with a younger woman, and the sense of adventure it brought to his otherwise mundane life. Yet, the notion of leaving his wife and the life they had built together was never part of his plans. For him, Tina was a diversion, an escape from the responsibilities and obligations that weighed heavily on him. He cherished their time together, but was not willing to sacrifice his stability for a fleeting passion. As this imbalance became clearer, Tina's emotional state began to deteriorate. With each moment of intimacy they shared, she grew more convinced that their love was true, despite the unspoken boundaries that Dr. Smith had carefully maintained. When they were together, it felt as if they were in their own world, but the moment they parted, doubt began to gnaw at her. Tina's insecurities festered, giving rise to jealousy that she had never experienced before. She found herself analyzing every text message, every phone call, and every interaction he had with others. She couldn't shake the feeling that Dr. Smith was still tied to his wife, and each time she sensed him pulling away, whether it was a missed call or an unanswered text, her heart ached with a mix of fear and despair. To cope with her growing anxiety, Tina began reaching out to friends, seeking validation and support. She confided in a few close confidants about her relationship, portraying it as a passionate love story. Her friends, caught up in the excitement, encouraged her to pursue her feelings with determination. However, they were unaware of the reality of Dr. Smith's commitment to his wife and family. In her heart, Tina knew the truth but struggled to accept it. She wanted to believe that their love could conquer all obstacles, that Dr. Smith would realize the depth of her affection and eventually leave his wife for her. Each time she conjured these fantasies, she would push aside her doubts, telling herself that love was worth fighting for. But with each passing day, as Dr. Smith remained emotionally distant, those fantasies began to shatter, revealing a painful reality that Tina was unwilling to confront. The emotional roller coaster took its toll on Tina. On the outside, she maintained her glamorous facade, but inside, she was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She vacillated between euphoric highs when they were together and crushing lows when they were apart. Each encounter became more charged, filled with both passion and tension, reflecting the complex dynamics of their relationship. Despite the tumultuous feelings, Tina clung to the hope that Dr. Smith would come around. She convinced herself that if she expressed her feelings more openly, perhaps he would reciprocate. So, during their next rendezvous, she decided to reveal her true emotions. Sitting across from him in a dimly lit cafe, her heart raced as she took a deep breath, preparing to confess the depth of her feelings. "George, I know we have something special," she began, her voice trembling with vulnerability. "I can't help but think about our future together. I believe we could have a life filled with love and happiness." Dr. Smith's reaction was not what Tina had hoped for. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding her gaze. "Tina, I care about you, but you know my situation," he replied, his tone laced with discomfort. "I can't leave my wife. You have to understand that." With those words, the illusion of their love shattered. Tina's heart plummeted into despair, the reality of their one-sided love starkly illuminated. The conversation left her feeling crushed and vulnerable, exposing the raw wounds of her emotional dependency on a man who could never fully belong to her. That night, Tina lay awake, her mind racing. She replayed the conversation, the hurt etched deep into her soul. The more she reflected on Dr. Smith's words, the more she recognized the toxicity of her situation. Yet, a small part of her clung to the hope that he would eventually see things her way. The emotional dependency she had built around him continued to entangle her, making it impossible for her to break free. As April wore on, the tension in Tina's life became palpable. The weight of her unreciprocated love began to transform her, shifting her from a hopeful romantic to a woman consumed by jealousy and rage. The seeds of destruction had been sown, setting the stage for an explosive confrontation that would forever alter the course of their lives. The air at Tina Carlin's home was thick with tension as she paced the floor, replaying the events of the day in her mind. The conversation with Dr. Smith had stung her deeply. During their last meeting, he had insisted once again that he would never leave his wife. His words felt like daggers, piercing through the illusion of love and commitment she had built around their affair. With each rejection, the excitement and passion she had felt in the beginning began to transform into frustration and desperation. Tina had always known that their relationship was fraught with challenges. Clandestine meetings, whispered conversations, and stolen moments were thrilling, but they were also painfully limited. As the weeks turned into months, she found herself increasingly consumed by her feelings for Dr. Smith, and the reality of their situation became more apparent. She felt trapped in a loveless marriage, while her love for him grew stronger each day, only to be met with his cold detachment. With tears in her eyes, Tina made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't allow Dr. Smith to continue stringing her along, leaving her with false hopes of a future together. Fueled by a mix of heartbreak and anger, she resolved to confront him at his home, to demand clarity and closure once and for all. When she arrived at Dr. Smith's house, her heart raced with a cocktail of emotions: love, anger, and desperation. The sky was overcast, mirroring her turbulent state of mind. She parked her car on the side of the road and took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. "This is it," she told herself. "I deserve answers." Entering through the front door, she found the house quiet, the atmosphere charged with an unspoken tension. Dr. Smith was in his study, a place where they had shared countless intimate moments, but now it felt like a battleground. As she stepped inside, she caught a glimpse of him seated at his desk, the soft glow of the desk lamp illuminating his features. He looked up, surprised to see her, but the warmth in his eyes had faded. "Tina, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice a mixture of concern and irritation. "I need to talk to you, George." "Now," she demanded, her voice trembling with urgency. He gestured for her to sit, but she refused, feeling the weight of her emotions pressing down on her chest. "I can't keep doing this," she started, her voice quivering. "You keep saying you love me, but then you go home to your wife as if I don't exist. I need to know what we are, what this is." Dr. Smith sighed, running a hand through his hair as he prepared to deliver the same speech he had given her multiple times before. "Tina, you know I care about you, but I can't leave my wife. I've built my life with her. It's complicated." Tina felt the blood drain from her face. "Complicated? Is that what you call it? I gave you everything, George. I thought we had something real. How can you keep doing this to me?" Dr. Smith looked away, his silence betraying the depth of his unwillingness to confront the reality of their relationship. He seemed distant, emotionally closed off. "You need to understand that this was never meant to last. It was supposed to be fun, exciting. But I can't just throw my life away for a fling." His words struck her like a blow to the gut, and she staggered back, struggling to process the harsh truth. "A fling? That's all I am to you. I thought you cared about me." Dr. Smith's expression hardened, and he replied coolly, "I do care about you, but you need to accept that I'm not leaving my wife. This isn't going to work." In that moment, something inside Tina snapped. The combination of rejection, betrayal, and anger surged through her, filling her with a dark energy. She felt as if her heart was shattering into a million pieces. The man she had loved and trusted was turning out to be someone she barely recognized. "Do you have any idea how it feels to be tossed aside like this?" she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls of the study. "You're a coward." Dr. Smith stood up, attempting to maintain his composure. "You need to calm down, Tina. This isn't helping anything." But Tina was beyond reason. Her mind raced as she felt an overwhelming urge to make him understand the pain he was causing her. In a moment of desperation, she turned toward the gun that was visibly displayed in a drawer of the desk, an item that had once seemed like a symbol of protection and safety. In that instant, it transformed into something sinister, something she felt she could wield to regain a sense of control. Without thinking, she reached for the gun, her heart pounding in her chest. "You need to listen to me," she cried, raising the weapon toward him, her hand shaking with a mix of fear and adrenaline. "You don't get to treat me like this. Not after Aang." Dr. Smith's expression changed from irritation to shock. "Tina, put that down. You don't want to do this." But the desperation in Tina's heart was too loud, drowning out his words. Overcome by rage and despair, she felt the world around her fade away as she pulled the trigger, a deafening noise that shattered the silence of the room. In that split second, her life and Dr. Smith's spiraled into darkness, forever altering the course of their destinies. The air was thick with tension in Dr. Smith's study as Tina faced him, her heart racing with a mix of anger and despair. The rejection cut deeper than any physical wound, igniting a firestorm of emotions that she could no longer control. In that moment, overwhelmed by feelings of betrayal, desperation, and rage, she made a choice that would irrevocably change the course of her life. As Tina raised the gun, her hands trembled, not just from fear, but from the weight of her emotions. She had never intended to hurt him. She had only sought answers, validation, and love. But now, with a single pull of the trigger, she ended not just Dr. Smith's life, but also the life she had envisioned for herself. The sharp crack of the gunshot echoed through the room, shattering the silence and leaving a chilling stillness in its wake. Dr. Smith collapsed to the floor, a look of disbelief frozen on his face. Tina's breath caught in her throat as the reality of what she had done hit her like a tidal wave. Time seemed to freeze as she knelt beside him, her mind racing with panic and regret. Blood pooled around his body, and the room grew increasingly surreal, almost as if she were watching the scene unfold from a distance, unable to comprehend her actions. In a frantic attempt to regain control of the situation, Tina's instinct kicked in. She knew she had to act quickly, to create a narrative that would portray her as the victim rather than the perpetrator. Grabbing the gun, she looked around the room for anything that might help her story. Her eyes landed on a small drawer in Dr. Smith's desk, where she found a box cutter. In a moment of desperation, she used it to inflict a superficial cut on her arm, hoping it would convince authorities that she had acted in self-defense. She stumbled back, clutching her arm, her heart racing as she tried to think of what to say. In her mind, she rehearsed the script she would deliver to the police: an abusive partner, a struggle, a desperate act of self-defense. When the police arrived minutes later, they were greeted by a chaotic scene. The front door was ajar, and the smell of gunpowder lingered in the air. They rushed into the room to find Tina sitting on the floor, blood seeping from her arm and pooling on the carpet beside Dr. Smith's lifeless body. Her wide eyes were filled with tears, and she appeared genuinely distraught. Tina looked up at the officers, her voice trembling as she began to recount her story. "He attacked me," she cried. "I had no choice. I was scared for my life." Her act was convincing, her emotions raw, as she painted a picture of a violent confrontation. She claimed Dr. Smith had become enraged during their discussion, that he had lunged at her in a fit of fury. The officers listened carefully, noting the details of her account while securing the scene. However, as they began their investigation, inconsistencies started to emerge. Detectives quickly discovered that the relationship between Tina and Dr. Smith had not been the innocent affair she had initially portrayed. Evidence began to accumulate: a series of text messages filled with declarations of love, plans for the future, and increasingly possessive behavior on Tina's part. Witnesses from the clinic testified to seeing them together outside of work, hinting at a passionate and tumultuous romance that contradicted her claims of fear and abuse. Moreover, the forensic evidence told a different story. The angle of the gunshot wound, the absence of any defensive injuries on Dr. Smith, and the lack of a struggle in the room all painted a grim picture. The investigators began to suspect that Tina's narrative was an elaborate cover-up designed to shift the blame away from herself and onto Dr. Smith. As the details unfolded, the media began to pick up on the case, sensationalizing the story of the beautiful young woman and the respected doctor. Headlines declared the affair a dangerous liaison that ended in murder, capturing the public's imagination and outrage. In the days following the shooting, Tina found herself not just in physical pain from her self-inflicted wound, but also in emotional turmoil. She had anticipated sympathy, understanding a narrative that would paint her as the victim. Instead, she was now the subject of a police investigation, her life spiraling out of control. As she sat in the interrogation room, waiting for the officers to return, she realized that the story she had crafted was unraveling. The weight of her actions bore down on her, and the realization of what she had done began to sink in. The man she had loved, the life she thought they would share, was gone forever, and her future was now shrouded in uncertainty. Tina Carlin had stepped into a world of darkness, from which there would be no escape as the truth of her actions and the consequences began to take shape, leading her toward a trial that would expose the depths of betrayal, obsession, and tragedy. As the sun rose on the morning of September 1, 2011, the small courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The trial of Tina Carlin, accused of murdering the respected Dr. George Smith, had attracted media attention and public interest far beyond the small town where the crime took place. Locals packed the gallery, eager to witness the unfolding drama of a case that had captured the headlines for months. Tina, once a vibrant young woman, appeared haggard and defeated as she entered the courtroom. The black and white striped prison attire contrasted sharply with the colorful clothing she used to wear, symbolizing her fall from grace. Her defense attorney, a seasoned lawyer known for his passionate courtroom presence, stood by her side, determined to argue her innocence. As the trial progressed, the courtroom drama intensified. Emotions ran high during closing arguments, and the jury was faced with a difficult decision. They were tasked with determining whether Tina Carlin had acted in self-defense or if her actions constituted premeditated murder. After days of testimony and cross-examinations, the jury retired to deliberate. The weight of the evidence loomed large in their minds, and they understood the gravity of the decision they had to make. As they discussed the case, the jury grappled with the complexities of love, betrayal, and the tragic end of Dr. Smith's life. After a tense deliberation that lasted several hours, the jury returned to the courtroom. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Tina's heart raced as the foreman stood to deliver the verdict. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Tina Carlin, guilty of first-degree murder." The words hung in the air, sending shockwaves through the courtroom. Gasps erupted from the audience, and Tina's face fell in disbelief. She had hoped for a different outcome, a chance to explain her side and seek redemption. Instead, she was faced with the reality of her actions, an irreversible decision fueled by passion and despair. The judge called for order in the courtroom as the prosecution celebrated their victory. Tina's defense attorney placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, but there was little solace in that moment. The gravity of the verdict weighed heavily on her, and as the realization of her fate sank in, Tina understood that she would pay the price for the choices she had made. As the courtroom emptied, Tina was led away in handcuffs, her heart heavy with remorse. The media, always eager for a story, buzzed with speculation about her motives and the tragic unfolding of events. News cameras flashed, capturing the moment she left the courtroom, forever marked as a murderer. The headlines blared, emphasizing the salacious details of the affair, yet underneath it all lay a deeper message about the dangers of infidelity and unchecked desire. Dr. Smith's wife, left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life, chose to withdraw from the public eye. For her, the loss was not just of a husband, but also of the life they had built together, a life that had been marked by trust, love, and shared dreams. The betrayal was a wound that would never fully heal, leaving her grappling with anger, sadness, and a profound sense of isolation. Friends and family reached out, but she found solace in solitude, refusing to engage with a world that had become tainted by betrayal and scandal. In the months that followed, the case became a cautionary tale discussed in schools, community centers, and even therapy groups. Experts delved into the psychology behind Tina's actions, exploring themes of obsession, betrayal, and the consequences of infidelity. It served as a stark reminder that passion, when left unchecked, could lead to devastating consequences. Workshops focused on the importance of communication in relationships and the dangers of emotional manipulation, encouraging individuals to confront issues in their partnerships before they spiraled out of control. Meanwhile, as Tina settled into her new life behind bars, she often found herself lost in reflection. The stark reality of her circumstances weighed heavily on her conscience. Each night, as she lay on the narrow cot in her cell, memories of her life with Dr. Smith haunted her. The laughter, the stolen moments, the dreams of a future together, all felt like distant echoes of a life that had slipped through her fingers.